What does the Statue of Liberty have to do with modern architecture? Coming up on Architecture CodeX.
Architecture CodeX. If you want to see more, subscribe.
Welcome to a special Architecture Codex filmed at Liberty Island, where the Statue of Liberty stands. You may wonder what a statue has to do with architecture. Well, you don't have to go back to the Colossus of Rhodes to realize that statues and architecture were the same thing up until the modern era. And we'll look at that today. Before mankind built buildings, they made statues. In the caves of Grimaldi, we find miniature statues, the so-called Venuses. By the time humans were building permanent buildings, the greatest effort went to the temples, which had some sort of god effigy, a statue. And from the Mesopotamian era through the Egyptians, Greco-Roman era, medieval Europe, Renaissance Europe, into Asia and Mesoamerica, the architecture was always enhanced by statues. Three of Europe's greatest sculptors, Michelangelo, Borromini, and Bernini, were also architects. Modern architecture changed that, perhaps because its greatest architects were not sculptors of realistic-looking human figures. The Colossus of Rhodes is the most famous precedent and was named one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. It was built by Caius of Lindos in 280 BC on the Isle of Rhodes, depicting the god Helios, the Greek sun god. It was probably bronze, 108 feet tall, and reportedly stood astride the entrance to the harbor. During an earthquake barely 60 years later, it collapsed. In 653 AD, Muslim general Muawiyah conquered Rhodes and pillaged its remnants. There has been talk of rebuilding the Colossus, but nothing yet has been planned. The idea for the Statue of Liberty started in 1865 in France with abolitionist and historian Edouard de la Bourdieu, who was impressed with how the American Civil War ended slavery. Knowing the USA was approaching its centennial in 1876, he suggested the people of France make a gift of a statue marking these achievements. He discussed the idea with sculptor Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. Some years earlier, Bartholdi had proposed a Colossus statue to mark the entrance of the newly built Suez Canal. It would have been an Egyptian female holding a torch, quote, Egypt carrying the light to Asia, end quote. But the Khedive of Egypt and the builders of the canal turned him down. In 1871, Bartholdi visited New York and selected for the location of the statue Bedloe's Island in New York Harbor, which was accessible only by ferry. It was federal land ceded by the New York legislature for federal defense of the harbor. Indeed, the pedestal for the statue would sit on the remnants of the old Fort Wood. President Ulysses S. Grant said it would be easy to obtain the island for this site of the statue, and the idea was that the French would contribute the statue and the Americans would build the pedestal. The campaign was slow in both countries, and it delayed the statue far beyond the American Centennial. Bartholdi and Laboulaye considered different symbols for liberty, including a Native American woman, but that was considered too controversial. Inspired by Libertas, the Roman goddess of liberty, images of liberty as a female had been appearing on American coins for decades. Shunning the Roman accoutrements such as the pileus, a hat worn by freed slaves, Bartholdi instead created more contemporary symbols. A tablet with July 4, 1776, inscribed on it, her feet crushing chains, a crown depicting 7 rays of light emanating from her head, symbolizing the unity of 7 continents and 7 seas, and a torch to light the way through the harbor, but also during times when liberty would be in danger. To support the form of the statue, Bartholdi engaged Alexander Gustave Eiffel, the same man who gave us the Eiffel Tower in Paris. His wrought iron structure bears the load of the statue and the interior stairs to the crown room and up to the arm and torch. It also supports the webwork of trusses and bars that support the copper relief that is the skin of the statue. This project, in addition to the Eiffel Tower, showed that iron and eventually steel structure were practical for modern buildings.
There would not have been modern skyscrapers without these pilot projects. And interestingly, the undulating titanium steel buildings of Frank Gehry uses the same method of metal substructure and flexible armatures that were developed in the building of the Statue of Liberty. The statue originally was a copper color, but it developed a protective green patina as the exterior oxidized. Copper was selected instead of bronze because it was lighter and cheaper and easier to work. Bronze is an alloy of copper and tin and is more durable. The use of copper led to the deterioration of the statue, particularly where the iron structure met the copper, causing corrosion known as galvanic action. Visitors can walk the 354 steps from the base to the crown via a narrow double helix stair, an upside and a downside. The room in the crown is small but worth the trip. Since 1916, most tourists like me have never been permitted to climb the stairs in the arm to the torch. The torch was modified from the original with windows making it self-illuminating for many decades. But what happened in 1916 was that German saboteurs set off an explosion of munitions stored on the nearby Black Tom Island. The concussion broke glass in windows as far away as Manhattan Island, and shrapnel damaged the statue, and according to reports, it also damaged the statue's arm structure, and tourists have not been allowed up since.
Many New Yorkers live and die in New York and never get to the Statue of Liberty. I'm here for my fourth time because when tourists come, I will take them. And that's the only reason I've been visiting the Statue of Liberty for so many years.
I wanted to take my kids, but after 9/11, the statue was closed for many years, and the crown was even less accessible. And frankly, I think you need to walk the narrow spiral stairs to the crown for a complete visit. But now to book a trip to the crown could require 6 months of planning in advance. And with a young, active family in school, that is harder than it sounds. But to see the statue up close from the outside only and still take part in all that history and significance is worth the ferry ride. But that means my kids and my wife are like typical New Yorkers, having never visited the statue. In 1984, in preparation for the statue's own centennial, it was closed for a major restoration. Layers of paint and coal tar that had hid problems were removed. Holes were patched. Stainless steel and beryllium bars replaced the original iron supports to hold the copper skin without promoting galvanic corrosion. Elevators were added to the pedestal and an emergency elevator to the shoulder of the statue. In the restoration, the original window perforated torch was placed in a museum and a new solid torch, like the original design, was installed. It is illuminated by carefully placed electric lights. This restoration was done while they also restored Ellis Island, an important destination for many immigrants. The work was completed in time for the Centennial celebration on the July 4th weekend in 1986. I watched the 100th anniversary fireworks from Liberty State Park with some friends and a few 100,000 other people. As it took hours for us to arrive by shuttle buses, it should not have been a surprise that when we all wanted to leave at the same time after the fireworks, the result was mayhem. I found it a bit disturbing how quickly the crowd went from a unified celebration to self-interest. Shuttle buses were stormed by impatient, angry people. But the buses couldn't move because the hordes of people were blocking the roads. The best thing to do was sit back and wait for hours for the first swarms to leave. This was all before cell phones, but somehow my friends and I, separated by the mob, eventually made it to Hoboken and reassembled. One technique was to leave a message on each other's answering machines. But now I know what the evacuation of Moscow in fear of Napoleon or Atlanta in fear of Sherman looked like. Perhaps it is a lesson in how fragile liberties can be if not staunchly defended by people of integrity. While originally a symbol of the founding freedoms and the end of slavery, the statue took on a different significance during the mass migration shortly after it was erected. Europeans made mass migrations, some 24 million, from 1890 to 1930, about half of whom passed through Ellis Island. This included in particular Italians, Eastern Europeans, Jews, Poles, Greeks, and more Irish and Germans who had migrated previously. This surge was allowed to provide labor for the growing industrialization of America. But immigrants needed sponsors and had to prove they would not be a burden. Some coming through Ellis Island were sent back. There were no governmental social services, and while private, often Christian charities abounded, conditions were not easy. In 1883, to help raise money for the pedestal, Emmer Lazarus wrote the poem The New Colossus, which began to shift the significance of the statue from liberty and the end of slavery to a symbol for immigrants. A plaque of the poem was added to the pedestal in 1903. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, mother of exiles, from her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome, her mild eyes command. The air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame, keep ancient lands your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. I'm not sure all my Italian grandparents who emigrated would like being referred to as wretched refuse, but otherwise you get the point. As the many millions entered New York Harbor, they all looked to see the Statue of Liberty greet them and assure them that with liberty, unknown in their home country, this was the land of opportunity. Although there's an interesting musing by the grandmother in Neil Simon's play Lost in Yonkers, and she talks about arriving in New York Harbor and seeing the Statue of Liberty and saying to herself, "This woman doesn't look Jewish. I don't know if it's going to be easy here." Starting with its erection and since, the Statue of Liberty itself has become a symbol of the United States. In art, official documents, pop culture, music videos, the Statue of Liberty is featured or transformed.
So the significance of architecture and statues over time can change, and that's okay, because that's how our culture grows and develops. I'm Michael Molinelli, and this is Architecture Codex.